to episode 21 of 5 Reasons Not to Harm Your Loved Ones During Quarantine. Today we are going to talk about the anatomy of an allegation and just kind of follow up on some of the thoughts we talked about yesterday. A few things before we get there, though. We have some news in the COVID-19 update front. First and foremost, Attorney General Dana Nessel has laid off 25% of her office employees. That's over 100 people who are now on furlough. As we heard yesterday, Governor Whitmer took a 10% pay cut. And everyone's really doing their part to try to direct money into the crisis in the pandemic and all of the necessary supplies, food. There's been some really super generous donations. The Ford family donated, I think it was $500,000, along with the Detroit Lions, to feeding the poor, that great organization that services the Detroit area. But then we have things that are very confusing. And as we talked about a couple days ago, Beaumont in Wayne County closed its doors. Beaumont, Wayne, it's called. I think it's actually in the city of Wayne, not Wayne County. Sorry about that. And what was discovered yesterday is that there were 50 bodies that had been housed there in a temporary morgue facility, that when they closed their doors, evidently it wasn't known or disclosed that they were there. So there's an investigation into that at Beaumont right now. And the other issue is, and we've talked about this before, mostly at Henry Ford, but here's one at Beaumont, where they've been accused of hoarding PPE, the personal protection equipment, the masks, the shields, all that stuff, also at this Beaumont in Wayne. So that's just some interesting stuff that came up. The other thing that came up, which I actually heard about this last week, but didn't realize it would be coming so quickly, is that there is a preliminary approval if you are directed by your doctor to do a home COVID-19 test. The cost of the test is $119, and I'm unsure where you would purchase them or how that would all come about, because it didn't really say in any of the news outlets that I check daily in this regard, but it was interesting nonetheless, because as we've talked about before, a lot of our return to work and return to life as we knew it or will know it is going to be contingent on not only testing for the virus, but testing for the antibodies and making sure that we're all safe and healthy to go back. The governor will go live at 3 p.m. today. She will have Dr. Caldoun as always, and then she will also have Dr. Marissa Eisenberg, who's an epidemiologist from U of M, and I think that should be interesting and a new perspective for us. So, as I talked about the testing, just to give you some perspective of what we're doing here right now, is in Michigan, we have performed 121,298 tests. That's the 11th highest amount of tests in the United States. But if you look at that per 1 million people, it's a different equation. And we actually fall to be 25th in our testing per 1 million people in the country. So we definitely still need more tests, and it's not just the tests, it's the reagents and the people to do the analysis and the testing and the science and all that stuff. As for of our actual case count as of 3 o'clock yesterday, 32,967 cases, which is up 967 from yesterday. So almost 1,000 cases since yesterday. And we are at around 2,700 deaths, which is approximately 300 more than yesterday. But as those numbers are still climbing, they're not climbing as rapidly as they were, which is super scary because they're still really high numbers. But there are, at this moment, 3,237 people who have recovered. So if you remember, about a week and a half ago, that number was like 400. So all these numbers are going up, and rates are slowing and rates are gaining. It's a little bit skewed because there's places offsetting each other. Right now, Genesee County is on the rise, while like Oakland County and the really strict stay-home communities are in more of a decline. So that's just something to watch. If you look at the chart, that every time the governor speaks, she shows us the state of Michigan in the different colors of red and pink in the chart. You'll notice that the dark red is moving up the state instead of just poof going away. So it'll be interesting to hear what she has to say today. I don't know, but I'm going to give you a little speculation that she's going to talk about, possible ways that the state will change on May 1st when the current stay home, stay put order is expired. As we talked about yesterday, she will need the legislature to grant her additional executive powers in order to enter executive orders to continue the stay home, stay put order. And Tony, I totally agree with you. Opening the state prematurely because of, for whatever reason, would be a really, really dangerous proposition. Now, moving on to our topic today, and it's anatomy of an allegation. And yesterday we talked about how 17 is the magic number, which distinguishes if you are going to be charged with a crime as an adult or as a juvenile. And we talked about the difference between the adult system and the juvenile system. So just feeding off of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about allegations and how people need to understand that when someone makes an allegation, there is automatically, or should be, I should say, because in some instances it's not, investigation. And the investigation would be done by different people depending on what kind of allegation it was. Allegations are usually, made to a friend, a mom, a doctor, a therapist, the police, whoever it is going to look different of how it progresses through the process. If it's a report, let's say that your child goes to school and has a black eye, and the teacher says, Billy, what happened to your eye? And Billy's joking around and doesn't really understand the consequences of his answer and says, oh, my dad punched me in the eye. And so that teacher, along with with emergency room people, protective services workers, nurses, doctors, child care providers, teachers, principals, psychologists, they're mandatory reporters. And mandatory reporters report based on suspicion, not facts, not investigation. They report on suspicion. If they don't report, they could face a criminal penalty, a criminal charge of misdemeanor. There are instances, I represented an ER doctor a really long time ago at Children's Hospital who the foster parent had brought in a baby and said the baby was fussy. The baby had a bunch of fractured ribs, and other broken bones that were healing. And the foster parents said, "Oh, that's from before the child came to live with me. That was from the birth parents." And so it was never reported because it appeared this child was in foster care. It already had been reported. And sure enough, that it was not reported by that ER doctor, and 4 days later, the baby died at the abusive hand of the foster parent. So there's a lot of stickiness with mandatory reporters, and when you have to, and when you should, and when you shouldn't, and who you should consult before you do. But it's supposed to be a strict standard that if you suspect, you report. And from my perspective, as someone who represents people who are accused, and I think that mere suspicion is not really enough. You need to kind of weigh the factors of each individual circumstance and then decide if you're suspicious or not. It shouldn't be automatic that if you see, a bruise, you're automatically going to call. We have to be a little more realistic than that. So if you have an allegation, that's made to a mandatory reporter, then they will fill out a form. It's literally form 3200. That's the number on the form, and it will be filed with Protective Services. There'll be a worker who is either on call if it's a weekend or the evening, or a worker who is assigned, and they will have to have contact with the parents and the child and any other child residing in the home within 24 hours. Protective Services workers can go pull your child out of class without your permission. So sorry about that. When you are driving your car and it's like 3 miles to empty, and you decide that, it's like 4 miles till I can get home, and so you don't stop and get gas. Well, I guess I should have plugged in my computer a little earlier then, instead of risking it on the theory of, I can go that many miles with that little bit of gas. And so we're back anyway. And I hope that everyone is still there, and sorry for the inconvenience. So we were talking about the anatomy of an allegation and about mandatory reporters, and I wanted to turn to one certain situation, and that is when an allegation is made to a therapist. And sometimes that creates all different challenges that we don't see in some of the other circumstances. By the way, the boy who told the teacher that his dad punched him in the eye, what really happened was the boy was on his top bunk. He thought that he could fly. He jumped off his bed, tried to grab the ceiling fan so he could fly like Superman, and ended up falling on the finial on the corner of his bed. And that's how he really got his black eye. They're not always what they appear to be. The allegations in therapy. Allegations in therapy can be suspect because they are not always the first person who has been told. Usually, if someone may be in therapy because they've made an allegation, or they don't know how to disclose. Allegations work and correlate with memory. So if memory has 3 components. That is the part where your memory actually absorbs or encodes the memory. Then it stores the memory, and then it is retrieved. During that encoding phase, as it's coming in, it's not going into a perfect little file or a card catalog. It's being like a piece here, a piece here, a piece here. It's kind of all over within that portion of your brain where your memory is. So Then during the retrieval phase, what happens is that you have, depending on the stimulus to retrieve it, different parts of the memory are going to be retrieved. So if, just an example, if you walk by an Italian restaurant and and you may remember, the time that you were in Florence, having pasta at the bottom of the Spanish Steps, and all those beautiful memories will come back. However, if you walk by that same Italian restaurant, and it's raining and you're with, like a bunch of peers, work people, that memory may be retrieved back to some business lunch and not some romantic place. So that's what I mean by the retrieval, and what the stimulus is that causes the retrieval can make a difference. So I'm making this sort of complicated topic really simple. But the therapeutic situation is complicated because therapists are subjective. If someone comes into a therapeutic setting, they're there because they want to feel better, whatever it is. It could be, anxiety, it could be an allegation, it could be mistreatment, it could be just, I'm losing my mind, I've been in my house for 5 weeks, it could be anything. And what happens in that setting is that you don't have someone there saying, well, is that really true? Is that what happened? Can you tell me more about that? What do you mean by that? You have no testing of the allegation. You merely have acceptance as true. And in a case where it's an allegation, that sort of reinforcement or confirmation of what the person is saying can affect the allegation and the integrity of the memory. And when you bring that into a court case or a criminal case or anything like that, whether you're a witness or you're the person who is the accuser, we have to evaluate those situations very carefully to look at the integrity of the evidence. Because in these cases where you have an allegation like this, that's being reported of an assault, a sexual assault, of child abuse, whatever it may be, in those circumstances, the memory is the evidence. And if you look at it from a different perspective, that if you had, a dead body in an alley, and the police showed up, and they don't just run in there and grab the knife with their bare hands. Instead, they have to protect the integrity of the knife. They have to preserve the evidence. So what they do is they'll come in, the evidence tech, the person who's trained to handle the evidence, and they will very carefully, they'll photograph it. They'll then put a little marker down that says A or 1 or whatever, and then they photograph it again on the ground with that little marker. And then they put gloves on, and they'll pick it up and they'll put it in a bag, and there'll be a picture of that. And then they'll, bag it and tag it is what they call it. And when they tag it, they seal it. They put their initials on the tape. They put the date, the time, and everything, so that the integrity and who touched it and when they touched it and how they touched it is preserved. And then the next time that changes hands, whether it goes into a box and into the police car, and then into the station, and then into the evidence room, and then into the evidence locker, and then it's stored in a certain place, all of that is going to be documented. That's called the chain of custody. And that preserves the integrity of the evidence. When you have an allegation, that memory is the evidence, but every single time someone talks about that memory, or is asked about that memory, or overhears people talking about that event, or hears someone else's description of that event, whether it's not just formal interviews and formal investigation that can affect that allegation. It's everything: rumors, peer-to-peer influence, anytime a trusted individual, a mom, a dad, a teacher, therapist, talks about it. And once that memory is compromised, it's irreversible. You cannot go back to what the original observation or experience was. We have an even bigger issue with analyzing allegations when we have younger children who are making them. And the reason is because of something called source monitoring error. Source monitoring error is that when children, usually under the age of 5, but that can vary, they can't distinguish if they know something is true because someone told them it was true, or because it really happened and it was their own experience. They can't make that distinction because the frontal lobe of their brain has not developed to a sophisticated point where they can make that distinction. We also have issues with children and allegations with linguistics and how they talk, and that their words could be used in perfect context and they have no idea what they mean. Younger children get in and on mixed up. They have different definitions for them than adult definitions. We also have situations, how many of you have seen your children use the F-bomb in perfect context and have no idea what it means, and you as a parent are like, oh my God. But so we have to look at allegations in all these different ways. Then you have allegations that require an absolute immediate response from the police or from an emergency room physician, where they're immediately calling and reporting, and that witness could be, or that alleged victim could be removed from their family, removed from their loved one. Children, they could be put in foster care or with a relative, and it happens very, very quickly because depending on who's investigating, which agency it is, the goals are different. If it's protective services, the goal is to protect the child, and they're going to make sure that child is safe and then figure it out later if the allegation is legit or not. If it is the police, then they're going to do everything they can to take statements and move as quickly as they can to take that allegation to the next step, whatever that might be. And so that's a little bit about allegations and mandatory reporters. And again, I'm sorry that we had to do this as 2 parts today, but I wanted to also share with you, before I give you the recap of the 5 reasons, this has been kind of a lifesaver in my house, is each one of us, as we are trying to figure out how to coexist. While I have a college student, a high schooler, and my husband's also a lawyer, all trying to have our places to work and our Zoom conferences and everything, we have now resorted to, we all have our own secret jar of, my daughter likes natural peanut butter, my husband likes smooth peanut butter, and I like this. This is crunchy cookie butter. It's from Trader Joe's. It's absolute, wrong way. It's amazing. So if you need like a little, a little surprise pick me up, make you happy, it has like smushed cookies in it, and it's so good. Okay, 5 reasons not to harm your family in quarantine. Protective services are essential workers. The police are essential workers. There's no room in our jails, and we have limited access to courts right now. And the 4th reason is because kids can get in trouble and get their parents in trouble for doing kid things, and also for doing parent things that they're not old enough to do. And fifth and finally, because very few people, if any, look good in horizontal orange stripes. So with that, I hope that you will all be well, be healthy, stay home, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to continue kind of this series about legal procedure, and we'll talk a little bit tomorrow about the next steps in investigation. What happens after the allegation is in formal investigation, and how does that move forward, and what are some of the factors that can contribute to that? So I don't see any questions right now. So, oops. So with that, I will say goodbye, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.